During my father's will reading, my stepmother smirked and said, "Everything will belong to me." The lawyer cleared his throat and said, "Actually, he left you a very special letter." Her smug expression disappeared when she read. I never liked her. From the moment she walked into my father's life, I knew something was off. She was too polished, too rehearsed, like she had spent her whole life playing a role. But my father? He was smitten. I don't know if it was the loneliness after my mom passed, or if he was just blinded by her charm, but he fell hard. Within a year of meeting her, they were married. I was already out of the house by then, living my own life, but I visited often. And every single visit, I could see it, she was changing him. He used to be strong, confident, and full of life. But little by little, he became quieter. Less himself. He stopped calling as often. Whenever I did visit, she was always hovering, always speaking for him. And the money? Oh, the money started disappearing. My father was a successful man. He built his business from the ground up. We weren't billionaires or anything, but he was comfortable, more than comfortable. After my mom passed, he made sure I was taken care of, told me I'd never have to worry. But then she came along, and suddenly, accounts were being drained, investments were being restructured. I knew what she was doing. But my father wouldn't hear it. "She loves me," he'd say. I gritted my teeth and tried to be patient. Then, about a year ago, he got sick. At first, she brushed it off, told him it was just stress. He trusted her, why wouldn't he? She played the doting wife perfectly. But by the time he finally saw a doctor, it was too late. Stage 4. No chance of recovery. She cried in front of everyone. Played the role of the devastated wife. But behind closed doors? She was already making moves. Selling off his things, liquidating assets. She thought no one was paying attention. I was. I stayed with my father every chance I got in those final months. And one night, when she was out with friends, probably celebrating her soon-to-be windfall, he pulled me close and whispered, "Don't let her win." I didn't know what he meant at the time. When he passed, she wasted no time. She started planning renovations to the house before his body was even cold. She stopped answering my calls, acting as if I didn't exist. I wasn't surprised. I knew she was going to take everything. Or so she thought. The day of the will reading, she walked in with that smug little smirk on her face, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my rent. She barely acknowledged me, just took a seat, crossed her legs, and waited. The lawyer shuffled through some papers, cleared his throat, and began. She barely listened, only nodding along as he went through the formalities. But then, and to my wife, she straightened up, waiting for the confirmation of what she already believed, that everything, every last cent, would be hers. The lawyer paused. He glanced at me. Then, he continued. "He left you a very special letter." Her smirk faltered. "A letter," she repeated, like she had misheard. The lawyer slid a sealed envelope across the table. "Your husband's final wishes. He wanted you to read it here, in front of witnesses." She hesitated, eyeing the envelope like it might explode. Then, with a stiff smile, she picked it up and tore it open. As she read, her face turned pale. The smirk was gone. Her hands began to tremble. And then, her jaw clenched. Her eyes darted back and forth over the words as if she was desperately trying to find a loophole, some way out. Finally, she slammed the letter onto the table. This is a joke." The lawyer, ever professional, simply folded his hands. "I assure you, it is not." I leaned forward. "What does it say?" For the first time, she wouldn't look at me. Her confidence, her entitlement, it was slipping. And I knew, in that moment. My father had played the long game. He had known. And whatever was in that letter, it was going to destroy her. She sat there frozen, her grip tightening around the letter like she wanted to crush it in her hands. Her confidence was gone. That smugness, the one she always wore like armor, had cracked. The lawyer sat back, patient as ever. I could see the hint of something in his expression. Was it satisfaction? Maybe. He knew what was in that letter. He had known all along. Finally, she swallowed hard and whispered, "This isn't real. It can't be." I leaned forward. "What does it say?" She refused to meet my eyes. Her fingers trembled as she pushed the letter across the table, away from her, like the words on it had burned her. The lawyer took it, cleared his throat, and began to read. My father's voice came through in those words, strong and sharp, even in death. To my beloved wife. By now, you're sitting in that chair, waiting for what you believe is rightfully yours. You always assumed you had one. That I was too blind to see you for what you really are. But I wasn't blind. I was just patient. She sucked in a sharp breath. I knew the moment I got sick that you weren't going to take care of me. Not really. I watched you lie to my face, tell me I was fine, tell me I didn't need doctors. I saw you smile when you thought I wasn't looking. You counted down the days, didn't you? You were waiting for me to die so you could take everything. So you could live the life you always wanted, without me. Her face turned red, but she stayed silent. But here's the thing, my dear wife, I was never going to let you win. You took my love, my trust, my kindness, and you used it against me. But the one thing you never got, was my legacy. You get nothing. The room fell into stunned silence. I looked at her, waiting for the explosion. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. And then, finally, she found her voice. This is illegal, she hissed. He was sick. He wasn't in his right mind, the lawyer cut her off. Your husband was of sound mind when he drafted this will. He had multiple witnesses. Every legal precaution was taken. He paused, then added, you can challenge it, of course. But I assure you, you won't win. She shot up from her chair, shaking with rage. This isn't fair. I was his wife. I took care of him. I couldn't stop myself, I laughed. Did you? I asked, tilting my head. Because from where I stood, it looked like you were spending most of your time getting spa treatments and shopping while he was dying. Her glare could have set me on fire. The lawyer ignored her tantrum and kept reading. As for my estate, my business, my savings, everything I built with my own hands, it goes to the only person who ever truly cared about me. I felt my breath hitch. My child. I blinked. It was all mine. She must have realized it at the same moment because suddenly, her anger shifted. The fire in her eyes dimmed, replaced by something else. Calculation. She turned to me so fast it almost gave me whiplash. We can work something out, she said quickly, her voice suddenly soft. I mean, do you really need all of it? I took care of that house. I made it a home. Maybe I could just, I shook my head. No, she flinched. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Then, she straightened, lifting her chin. You'll regret this, she hissed. And with that, she stormed out. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt relief. But something told me. This wasn't over. Not yet. I thought that was the end of it. I really did. I sat there, staring at the letter, the weight of my father's words pressing down on me. It was all mine, the house, the business, the money. Everything he had built. Everything she had been circling like a vulture, waiting to claim. But the way she had walked out, the way she had hissed those final words, you'll regret this. It didn't sit right. And I was right to worry. Because 2 weeks later, I got a call that turned everything upside down. The lawsuit, she's contesting the will, the lawyer said, his voice calm, but firm. She's claiming undue influence, mental incompetence, and fraud. I almost laughed. Fraud? My father had that will signed, witnessed, and notarized. She doesn't have a case. Normally, I'd agree, he said. But, she's hired a very aggressive lawyer. And she's making a lot of noise. That made me pause. What kind of noise? She's claiming you manipulated your father while he was sick. That you forced him to change the will. That you took advantage of his weakened state. I gritted my teeth. That's ridiculous. She's the one who tried to cut him off from doctors. She wanted him gone as fast as possible. Yes, the lawyer agreed. But she's good at playing the victim. She's telling the court that she was a devoted wife, that you were barely around, and that you only swooped in at the end to steal everything. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. This woman, this parasite, was trying to rewrite history. What are our chances? I asked, my voice tight. The lawyer hesitated. And that hesitation sent a chill down my spine. We have the law on our side, he said. But she has something else. I frowned. What? She has connections. And that's when it hit me. My stepmother, for all her scheming, wasn't just some gold digger who had lucked into marrying a rich man. No, she had planned this. She had played the long game. She had built her network, made friends in all the right places. And now, she was cashing in on those favors. If she couldn't steal my father's money the easy way, she was going to try and take it through the courts. But I wasn't going to let her. She had underestimated my father. And now? She was about to realize she had underestimated me, too. The investigation the next few weeks were a nightmare. She paraded herself on social media, crying crocodile tears about how I had stolen her husband's estate. She gave interviews, playing the part of the grieving widow. And worst of all, people believed her. I started getting threats. Messages from strangers calling me a monster, a gold digger, a heartless child who had betrayed their own father. I wanted to scream. But then something happened that changed everything. It started with a phone call. A woman's voice, shaking, hesitant. "I saw the news," she said. "And I think you should know something." I frowned. "Who is this?" A pause. Then, "My name is Claire. And I used to be married to her." My breath caught in my throat. What? She's done this before. The past she tried to hide Claire and I met in person a few days later. She was nervous, constantly glancing over her shoulder like she expected my stepmother to burst through the door at any moment. And what she told me? It was worse than I ever could have imagined. "She married my father," Claire said, her voice low. "Years ago. Same story. Came into his life when he was vulnerable, made herself indispensable, convinced him she loved him. And then, he got sick." I swallowed hard. "She did the same thing," Claire whispered. "Cut him off from everyone. Took control of the finances. And by the time he realized what was happening, it was too late." "What happened?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Claire exhaled shakily. "She drained him dry. By the time he passed, there was nothing left. She walked away with everything." I felt sick. She had done this before. And worse, she had gotten away with it. Until now. The trap we set with Claire's testimony, we had something we never had before, a pattern. A history. But I knew one thing, my stepmother was smart. She had spent her whole life manipulating people, twisting the truth, covering her tracks. If we wanted to take her down, we had to be smarter. So we laid a trap. Claire agreed to reach out to her. Pretend to be sympathetic. Pretend to be angry at me. They met up, just the two of them, and my stepmother, oh so trusting, spilled everything. She bragged. Laughed. Mocked my father for thinking he could outsmart her. And best of all, she admitted, on a recorded phone call, that she had done it before. She admitted to everything. The day of the court hearing, she walked in like she had already won. Dressed to the nines, head held high, looking like the picture of an elegant widow. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Because the moment the lawyer played that recording, her world collapsed. She tried to deny it. Screamed that it was fake, that it was taken out of context. But it didn't matter. The judge ruled against her. Not only did she lose everything, she was facing criminal charges. Fraud. Financial abuse. And possibly, even worse. Because once the investigation into her past began, they found more. More husbands. More money. More victims. And now? She's facing prison time. As for me? I kept my father's legacy. I honored his last words. And most importantly, I made sure she never hurt another family again. She tried to run. The moment she realized the walls were closing in, she packed her bags, drained what little money she had left, and tried to disappear. But the police were already watching. The morning she was supposed to leave, they caught her at the airport. She fought. She screamed. She even faked tears, begging the officers to let her go. But it was over. The media ate it up. The grieving widow, exposed as a con artist. The perfect, elegant woman, now just another criminal in handcuffs. And me? I made sure the whole world saw it. Every news station covered her downfall. Every person who had sent me threats, every so-called friend who had taken her side, they all saw the truth. She wasn't a victim. She was a predator. And she was going to pay. Justice, at last. The trial was brutal. Not just for me, but for all the other families she had destroyed. Claire testified. Other victims came forward. Husbands, stepchildren, even an old business partner she had scammed out of thousands. One by one, their stories painted a picture of a woman who had spent decades lying, stealing, and ruining lives. She tried to play the victim. Claimed she was being framed. Blamed me, said I had orchestrated everything out of spite. But the evidence was too strong. The recordings. The bank statements. The witnesses. And when the jury came back with their verdict? Guilty. On all counts. Fraud. Theft. Elder abuse. The judge didn't hold back. She was sentenced to 25 years behind bars. She lost everything. The house? Gone. The money? Seized. Her reputation? Destroyed. She had spent her whole life scamming her way into wealth and power, believing she was untouchable. Now? She was just another inmate in an orange jumpsuit. The final goodbye I visited her. Not because I forgave her. Not because I wanted closure. But because I wanted her to see me, standing on the other side of that glass, free, successful, and untouched by the destruction she had tried to bring. When she saw me, she sneered. You think you won? I smiled. I know I did. Her eyes burned with hate. Good. I leaned in, just close enough for her to hear me over the hum of the prison. My father outsmarted you. And now? You get to rot, knowing you lost. She opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't care what she had to say. I stood up, turned my back, and walked away. For the first time since my father died. I felt at peace. She was finished. And his legacy? It was finally safe. And that, my friends, is how karma works.